Hello, my dear friends. Today I am going to share my journey of learning English, how I struggled, how I improved, and how I finally became confident in speaking, listening, and understanding English. My name is Emily Carter. I am 22 years old, and I live in New York, United States. I am a college student studying business administration. Since childhood, I have always loved reading and writing, but there was one thing that always made me nervous: speaking in English. I grew up in a family where English was not our first language. At home, we mostly spoke Spanish, and though I learned English in school, I never felt confident using it in real conversations. I could understand what my teachers and classmates were saying, and I could write English essays well. But when it came to speaking, I always hesitated. My mind would go blank, and I would start doubting myself. I remember one particular day when my professor asked me a simple question in class. I knew the answer, but I couldn't say it properly. My words got stuck, and I felt so embarrassed in front of everyone. That was the moment I realized I needed to learn English properly, speak fluently, and listen carefully to improve. So, I started my journey, step by step, and today, I want to share everything with you: the struggles, the mistakes, and the methods that worked for me. If you are also struggling with English, my story might help you. The beginning of my English learning journey. After that embarrassing classroom incident, I decided I had to improve. But the big question was, where do I start? I started searching for methods online, watching videos, and reading blogs about learning English. But soon, I realized that just watching videos and reading tips was not enough. I needed real practice. One day, my best friend, Sophia Martinez, who was fluent in English, told me something that changed my mindset. She said, "Emily, if you want to learn English, you need to use it every day. Don't just study English, live in English." That made so much sense. So, I made a plan to immerse myself in English completely. Step 1. Listening to English every day. The first thing I started with was listening. I knew that before I could speak well, I had to train my ears to understand English naturally. So, I changed my daily habits. I stopped listening to Spanish songs and started listening to English music. I paid attention to the lyrics and repeated them. I watched English TV shows and movies with subtitles at first, then without subtitles. Some of my favorites were Friends, The Office, and How I Met Your Mother. I listened to English podcasts and audiobooks while walking, cooking, or doing chores. It helped me get used to different accents. At first, it was difficult. I couldn't understand everything, and sometimes I felt frustrated. But I didn't give up. After a few weeks, I noticed a big difference. My brain started recognizing words and sentences faster. Step 2. Speaking English without fear. The biggest challenge for me was speaking. I had so many doubts. What if I make mistakes? What if people laugh at me? What if I forget words while speaking? But then, I remembered what my English professor, Mr. David Parker, once said. It's okay to make mistakes. The only mistake is not trying at all. So, I made a rule for myself. I will speak in English every single day, no matter what. Here's what I did. Talking to myself. I started speaking to myself in English. In the morning, I would say, Good morning, Emily. Today, you have a lot of things to do. First, you will go to class, then study in the library. This helped me think in English. Speaking with friends, I asked my friend Sophia to only speak to me in English. Whenever I made a mistake, she would correct me in a friendly way. Practicing with voice recording, I recorded myself speaking in English and listened to my pronunciation. It felt weird at first, but it helped me improve. Joining English conversation groups, I joined a group where students practiced speaking English together. It was scary at first, but everyone was learning, so no one judged each other. With time, my confidence grew. The more I spoke, the less I cared about making mistakes. Step 3. Expanding my vocabulary. Another problem I faced was not knowing the right words. Sometimes I wanted to express myself, but I didn't know the correct vocabulary. To fix this, I started reading English books and articles. I kept a notebook where I wrote down new words and their meanings. Using a Word of the Day app. Every day, I learned one new word and tried to use it in a sentence. Learning phrases instead of words. Instead of memorizing single words, I learned full phrases like, "Can you give me a hand?" instead of just, "Help." Step 4. Thinking in English. One day, I realized something amazing. I was starting to think in English. At first, I always translated from Spanish to English in my head, but after months of practice, English became automatic. When I saw something, I described it in English in my mind. For example, if I saw a dog, I wouldn't think, "Perro." Okay, that means dog. I would just think, "Oh, what a cute dog." This was a huge milestone for me because thinking in English makes speaking much faster and easier. After months of consistent effort, something incredible happened. One day, my professor, Mr. Parker, asked a question in class. This time, I raised my hand confidently. I answered in clear English, without hesitation. After class, my professor smiled at me and said, "Emily, your English has improved a lot. Keep going." That was the best moment of my English learning journey. I finally felt proud of myself. After that day in class when my professor praised me, I felt like I had finally broken the barrier that had held me back for so long. But I also knew that learning a language is a journey. It doesn't stop at just being good enough. I wanted to become truly fluent, to the point where I could speak naturally and confidently in any situation. That's when I realized learning English is not just about studying, it's about using it in real life. Taking English outside the classroom. Up until this point, most of my English practice had been in structured settings, talking with my friend Sophia, joining conversation groups, and practicing at home. But now I wanted to use English in my daily life, just like native speakers do. I started talking to strangers in English. When I went to a coffee shop, instead of pointing at the menu and saying, "One coffee, please," I started saying, "Hi, can I get a medium latte with oat milk?" When I took an Uber, instead of sitting in silence, I would ask the driver, "How's your day going?" At the grocery store, instead of just paying and leaving, I started small conversations with the cashier, saying things like, "Wow, it's really cold today." At first, it felt awkward. I worried about making mistakes. But soon, I realized that most people don't care if your English isn't perfect. They just appreciate the effort. The more I spoke, the more natural English became for me. The challenge of fast English. Even though I was improving, I still struggled in some situations, especially when native speakers talked too fast. One evening, Sophia invited me to a dinner party with her American friends. I was excited, but also nervous. When I got there, everyone was friendly. But as the conversation started, I felt lost. People were speaking so fast, using slang and idioms I had never heard before. I tried to follow along, but I kept missing words and phrases. I felt embarrassed again, like I didn't belong. That night, I went home feeling frustrated. But instead of giving up, I asked myself, how can I improve my listening? Improving my listening skills realized that listening to English in a controlled way, like audiobooks and podcasts, was different from real-life conversations. So, I changed my approach. I started watching TV shows without subtitles. Before, I had relied on subtitles too much. Now I trained my ears by listening without reading. I focused on common phrases and slang. I made a list of words like gonna, wanna, lemme, and practiced them. I repeated real conversations. I watched YouTube videos of native speakers talking and tried to repeat their sentences exactly how they said them. After a few weeks, I noticed something amazing. I was understanding English in real time without translating in my head. Speaking confidently in public. One of my biggest dreams was to speak in front of people without fear. At college, we had a presentation coming up. We had to stand in front of the class and talk about a topic for 5 minutes. I was nervous, but I remembered everything I had practiced. I prepared my speech, recorded myself practicing, and even spoke in front of a mirror. On the day of the presentation, I took a deep breath and stepped up. I spoke slowly and clearly, using gestures and eye contact. And for the first time ever, I didn't feel afraid. When I finished, my classmates clapped and my professor smiled. That was the moment I knew I had truly conquered my fear of speaking English. Taking English to the next level after my successful class presentation, I felt proud of how far I had come. But deep down, I knew that learning never stops. Even though I had improved a lot, I still had moments when I struggled, especially in fast conversations, professional settings, and writing formal emails. So, I asked myself, what's next? How can I become even better at English? Step 1. Mastering English conversations with native speakers. By this point, I was comfortable speaking with my friends and classmates, but I still found it challenging to keep up when talking to native speakers in fast, casual conversations. One day, I went to a bookstore, and while browsing, I overheard two American girls talking. They were speaking quickly, using words like, you know, like, kind of, gonna, wanna, and I realized I still had trouble with natural, everyday English. That's when I decided to immerse myself even more. I joined a local English-speaking club. This was a group where people practiced English by discussing different topics every week. At first, I was shy, but soon I started joining debates, telling stories, and sharing my opinions confidently. I made friends with more native English speakers. Instead of sticking to people who spoke my native language, I started talking more with American classmates. It helped me learn real expressions, humor, and cultural references. I started watching YouTubers who speak naturally. Instead of just learning proper textbook English, I focused on understanding how native speakers really talk. After a few months, something incredible happened. I could speak in a natural flow without translating in my head. Step 2. Writing and professional English. Even though my speaking had improved, I still felt nervous when I had to write emails, essays, or formal messages. One day, I had to send an email to my professor about an assignment. I wrote, "Hello, Professor. I need to talk to you about my project. Can we meet?" It was simple, but I felt like it didn't sound professional enough. So, I learned some formal writing tips. Instead of, "I need to talk to you," I wrote, "I would like to discuss my project with you." Instead of, "Can we meet?" Zrenia, I wrote, "Would it be possible to schedule a meeting?" By making small changes, my English sounded more natural and professional. To improve my writing, I also used Grammarly to check for mistakes, read articles and essays to see how formal English is written, practiced writing daily, emails, diary entries, and even social media posts in English. Now I can write emails, reports, and messages with confidence. Step 3. Thinking in English naturally one day, I had a realization. I was no longer translating from Spanish to English in my head. I woke up one morning, and instead of thinking, "Voy a levantarme y prepararme para la universidad," I naturally thought, I'm going to get up and get ready for college." This was a huge milestone. Thinking in English meant that I could speak faster, respond naturally in conversations, and feel truly comfortable with the language. How did I achieve this? I forced myself to describe everything around me in English. For example, while walking to class, I would think, "The weather is cold today. I need to buy a coffee." I changed my phone and apps to English. Every time I checked my messages or searched for something, I was reading and thinking in English. I talked to myself in English. Yes, it sounds funny, but I would narrate my day in English, even if I was alone. Thinking in English was the final step that made me feel like English was truly a part of me. Step 4. Helping others learn English. After going through this journey, I realized that many people struggle with the same things I did: fear of speaking, lack of confidence, and trouble with real conversations. So, I decided to help others. I started tutoring international students who were learning English. It felt amazing to share my tips and see others improve. I created an Instagram page where I posted English learning tips, common mistakes, and practice exercises. I helped my younger cousin, who was struggling in school, by speaking to her in English every day. By teaching others, I became even more confident in my own English skills. The moment I realized I had become fluent one day, I was at a cafe when a tourist from France asked me for directions. Without hesitation, I explained everything fluently. After thanking me, she asked, "Are you from the US?" I smiled. That was the moment I knew. I had finally become fluent in English. You don't need to be perfect. You just need to practice every day. Mistakes are part of the process. Speak even if you're afraid. Immerse yourself in English as much as possible. Listen, speak, write, and think in English. One day, you'll look back and realize you did it. You learned English. Taking my English journey even further. After that moment at the cafe, where the tourist mistook me for a native speaker, I felt an incredible sense of accomplishment. But at the same time, I knew that language learning never truly ends. There's always room to grow, new words to learn, and new ways to challenge myself. So I asked myself, what's next? I was fluent, but I wanted to sound even more natural, learn more advanced vocabulary, and feel 100% comfortable in every situation, whether casual, professional, or even emotional. Step 5. Perfecting my pronunciation and accent. Even though I could speak English fluently, I noticed that sometimes my pronunciation wasn't as clear as I wanted. Native speakers understood me, but I could tell that some words didn't come out exactly the way they should. One day, I was watching a YouTube video about accent reduction, and I realized that I had never actually focused on my pronunciation before. So, I decided to train my mouth, tongue, and voice to sound even more natural. Here's what I did. I shadowed native speakers. I played English podcasts and repeated every sentence exactly how they said it, mimicking their intonation, rhythm, and tone. I recorded myself speaking. I read out loud, recorded my voice, and compared it to native speakers. I noticed small things I needed to improve. I practiced difficult sounds. Some words were harder for me to pronounce, like world, comfortable, rural, and though. I practiced them until they felt natural. After a few months, my speech became clearer, smoother, and more natural. Step 6. Learning advanced and professional English. At this stage, I was comfortable in daily conversations, but I wanted to expand my vocabulary, especially for professional and academic situations. One day, in my college class, my professor used words like nuanced, extrapolate, and conundrum. I understood them in context, but I realized that I wasn't using high-level words in my own speech. So, I created a word bank notebook. Every day, I would write down new words I heard or read, learn their meaning, pronunciation, and usage. Create sentences using the words to make them part of my vocabulary. For example, instead of saying, "This book is interesting," I practice saying, "This book provides a fascinating perspective." After a few months, my speech sounded more polished, intelligent, and natural. Step 7. Thinking and dreaming in English. One night, something amazing happened. I had a dream, and in my dream, I was speaking English. That was when I knew English wasn't just something I was learning anymore. It was now part of me. Thinking and dreaming in English meant that my brain had fully switched into English mode. I no longer translated from Spanish to English. My thoughts flowed in English automatically. Step 8. Traveling and using English in real life. To take my English to the next level, I decided to travel to different states in the U.S. and experience different accents, cultures, and real-life situations. I visited New York, Los Angeles, Chicago, and Texas, and I realized that every place had different ways of speaking. In New York, people spoke fast and direct. I learned to keep up with fast conversations. In Texas, the accent was different, more relaxed and slow. I practiced understanding different pronunciations. In Los Angeles, I met people from all over the world. It helped me get comfortable with different English accents. Everywhere I went, I used my English skills with confidence. I talked to strangers ordered food without hesitation, asked for directions easily, and even made new friends along the way. This was when I truly felt free, because now English was no longer a foreign language to me. It was just my language. Looking back at my journey, I feel proud of how far I've come, but I also know that anyone can do what I did, including you. Here's my final advice if you want to speak, listen, and think in English fluently. Speak every day, even if you're afraid. No one speaks perfectly at first. Just start. Listen to real English, movies, podcasts, native speakers. The more you hear it, the more natural it becomes. Think in English. Describe your surroundings, talk to yourself, and slowly train your brain to stop translating. Challenge yourself. Talk to strangers, give a presentation, join a debate club. Push yourself out of your comfort zone. Never stop learning. Even now, I keep learning new words, improving my pronunciation, and perfecting my English. A new challenge: learning English in another country. After traveling across the U.S. and improving my English, I felt confident. But I wanted to take my learning even further. I decided to study abroad in the United Kingdom for a semester. Even though I was already fluent, I knew that living in a different country would help me experience English in a new way. So, I applied for a student exchange program at a university in London, England. After months of preparation, I finally got accepted. This was a huge step for me. Even though I was comfortable with American English, I had never lived in a completely new country with a different culture, accent, and way of speaking. Would I be able to understand British English? Would I struggle with different words and expressions? I was both excited and nervous at the same time. Arriving in London, a different kind of English. When I arrived in London, I immediately noticed something interesting. English sounded different here. People spoke in a different accent, tone, and speed. Some words and expressions were completely new to me. For example, in the US, people say apartment, but in the UK, they say flat. In the US, people say elevator, but in the UK, they say lift. In the US, people say soccer, but in the UK, it's called football. Instead of saying, "How are you?" many British people casually say, "You all right?" At first, I felt a bit confused. Even though I knew English, I had to adjust to these small differences, making friends and adapting to British English. At my university, I met students from all over the world. Some were from England, others from Europe, Asia, and Africa. It was an amazing experience because everyone spoke different varieties of English. To improve my British English skills, I started listening to British podcasts and watching UK shows like Sherlock and The Crown, practicing my pronunciation by mimicking the British accent, asking my British friends to correct me when I used American words. One of my British classmates, Emma, helped me a lot. She taught me new expressions like, "Fancy a cup of tea? Do you want some tea? It's brilliant. It's amazing. I'm knackered. I'm very tired." Slowly, I started feeling more comfortable using British expressions, overcoming challenges, and growing in confidence. Even though I was learning fast, I still faced some challenges. Understanding different British accents. In London, people spoke clear British English, But when I traveled to places like Manchester, Liverpool, and Scotland, the accents were much harder to understand. I had to train my ears to recognize different sounds. Speaking more naturally, at first, I still had an American-style pronunciation, but after months of practice, my English became a mix of American and British English. Adapting to British culture, I learned that in the UK, people love small talk, talking about the weather, tea, and daily life. I also learned that British people use a lot of politeness in their speech, like sorry, excuse me, and would you mind, even in casual situations. After 6 months in London, I realized something amazing. I wasn't just learning English anymore. I was living it. I could easily switch between American and British English, understand different accents, and communicate effortlessly with people from different backgrounds, exploring more countries to master English. After my incredible experience in London, I realized that learning English isn't just about studying, it's about living the language in different environments. I had already traveled across the United States and studied in the UK, but I wanted to push myself even further. So I made a bold decision. I would visit other English-speaking countries to experience more accents, cultures, and ways of speaking. Next, stop Australia, a unique English experience. After finishing my semester in London, I applied for a short-term English language program in Sydney, Australia. When I arrived in Sydney, I felt confident because I had already adapted to both American and British English. But within 5 minutes of talking to an Australian local, I was confused again. The challenge of Australian English was different from both American and British English. It had a unique accent. Australians shorten words and speak fast. Different vocabulary. Some words had totally new meanings. A relaxed, informal way of speaking. For example, instead of breakfast, Australians say brekkie. Instead of McDonald's, they say Macca's. Instead of flip-flops, they say thongs. If something is really good, they say it's heaps good. At first, I felt like I was learning a new version of English, but I didn't give up. I started watching Australian YouTubers to get used to the accent, talking to locals as much as possible, asking for explanations when I didn't understand slang. Slowly, I started to understand and even use Australian expressions naturally, meeting people from around the world. One of the best things about my time in Australia was meeting people from different countries who were also learning English. I met students from China, Brazil, Germany, India, and France, all trying to improve their English. We all had different accents, different ways of speaking, but we shared one goal: to become truly fluent in English. Talking to them helped me practice English in a new way. I learned to understand different accents. I learned how non-native speakers communicate in English. I realized that English is an international language, not just an American or British language. Final destination, Canada. The last step in my English journey. After 3 months in Australia, I traveled to Toronto, Canada, to complete an internship. Canadian English was very similar to American English, but there were small differences. For example, Canadians say "eh" at the end of sentences to ask for agreement. Nice weather today, eh? Instead of bathroom, they say washroom. Some words have British spellings, like color instead of color. By now, I was so comfortable with English that these small differences didn't confuse me anymore. I could switch between different English varieties easily. The moment I realized I was truly fluent, one evening in Toronto, I was at a cafe, talking to a group of people from different countries. We were discussing travel, culture, and life experiences. At some point, someone asked me, "Where are you from?" I smiled and said, "Guess." They thought I was American, British, or even Australian. That was the moment I truly felt that I had mastered English. I was no longer learning English. I was living it. Expose yourself to different accents and cultures. Don't just focus on one kind of English. Speak every day. Confidence is more important than perfection. Learn slang and informal speech. This will help you sound more natural. Surround yourself with English speakers. The more you interact, the faster you improve. Travel if you can. Experiencing English in different countries is the best way to learn. Now, when I think back to my first day of learning English, I can't believe how far I've come. And the best part? Right arrow. Tips and tricks for learning, speaking, and listening to English. Effectively, if you want to speak, listen, and learn English fluently, here are some practical tips based on real experiences. 1. Think in English instead of translating. Translating in your head slows you down. How to practice. Describe your daily activities in English in your mind. Example: I am making coffee. The water is boiling. Try to name objects around you in English. Example: this is my laptop. That is my backpack. If you don't know a word, explain it in simple English. Example: instead of translating umbrella, say, "It is something that protects me from rain." 2. Listen to different English accents. Why? English sounds different in the USA, UK, Australia, Canada, and other countries. How to practice. Watch movies and TV shows from different English-speaking countries. Example: American English, Friends, British English, Sherlock, Australian English, Bluey. Listen to podcasts in different accents. Example: BBC Learning English for British, All Ears English for American. Watch interviews of celebrities with different accents to train your ears. 3. Shadowing technique. Imitate native speakers. Why? It helps with pronunciation, fluency, and natural speech patterns. How to practice. Pick a short clip, YouTube, podcast, movie scene. Listen to one sentence, pause, and repeat exactly how they say it. Copy their tone, speed, and pronunciation. Example: watch a TED Talk, pause after each sentence, and repeat exactly how the speaker says it. 4. Speak English every day, even if you're alone. Why? Speaking is like exercising. If you don't practice, you won't improve. How to practice. Talk to yourself in front of a mirror. Example: today I am going to the supermarket. I need to buy vegetables. Use voice recording apps to record and listen to your pronunciation. Join English-speaking groups or language exchange programs online. 5. Learn common idioms and phrases. Why native speakers use idioms in daily conversations. Examples: break a leg, good luck. It's raining cats and dogs. It's raining heavily. Hit the books, to study. Learn 5 new idioms every week and use them in conversations. 6. Expand your vocabulary with context. Why? Memorizing words alone doesn't help. You need to see them in action. How to practice. Read articles, blogs, or books in English. Write down new words and create sentences with them. Use flashcards apps like Anki or Quizlet. Example: if you learn the word enthusiastic, use it in a sentence. I am enthusiastic about learning English. 7. Use English in real-life situations. Why? You need to use English in different contexts to feel comfortable. How to practice. Order food in English at restaurants. Talk to strangers when traveling. Change your phone settings to English. 8. Be patient and consistent. Why? Learning English is a journey, not a one-time task. Tips to stay motivated. Set small daily goals. Example: today I will learn 10 new words. Celebrate small wins. Example: I had my first conversation in English. Don't be afraid of mistakes. Mistakes are proof that you are learning. Final thought: keep practicing and enjoy the process. English is not just about grammar and vocabulary, it's about confidence and communication. The more you listen, speak, and think in English, the more fluent you will become. Start today and make English a part of your daily life.